Hello, everyone, and welcome to my first movie review. My name is Isaac, and welcome to Isaac and Friends. We do a lot of gaming, we do a lot of different stuff on this channel, and this is the first time I actually am going to be talking about a movie that a friend and I went to go see this week. We went and saw Alien Romulus. Now, personally, I rather enjoyed this film, and I'm going to tell you, quite frankly, if you haven't seen it, there's going to be spoilers in this review. So please do yourself a favor, go see the film, go check it out, have a good time. To me, I think it's a wonderful little love letter to Aliens, and the franchise as a whole. Now, I enjoyed the cinematography, I thought the sound direction was really good. It definitely had more than a few spikes, and it even got me a little tripped out here and there. So, now we're going into spoiler territory, so if you don't want spoilers, I've got plenty of other videos on the platform to check out. Or hey, go find somebody that you might enjoy more. I know I'm small enough that most people probably don't even know who I am. So, to get a feeling of this film, me and my buddies actually, when we were sitting in the theater, our particular screen had an interesting quirk where, in some cases, ads that were playing before the film would either have sound or not have sound. So for a while, most of us in our little friend group that was watching this figured we might actually end up getting a silent alien film. Which, when the opening of the movie starts out and there's no sound, yeah, we were like, oh, okay, yeah, this is happening. Cool. This will be an interesting experience. But I assure you, it does have sound. The empty void of space, it seems that they decided to do the same thing that happened in Star Wars, where they gave you a taste of what it actually is like to be in space. We're introduced to a mysterious vessel that seems to be heading toward the direction of a debris field. As the screen pans over, we begin to see a panel from one of the debris, and on the side of it states Nostromo, which tells us that we are in fact in the debris field of the Nostromo from the original Alien film. Rather than just be some average salvagers, however, looking for bits and parts of the old hauler and the refinery it was carrying, this particular vessel seems to be interested in what seems at first to be a massive hunk of rock. The ship captures the hunk of rock and then departs to a mysterious unknown location, where its cargo is then dropped off in front of a whole horde of scientists and researchers and people in hazmat suits. The rock is then cracked open and something is mysteriously carted away out of it. At this point, it's pretty clear that this rock is some kind of cocoon created by the original alien that Ellen Ripley had managed to jettison outside of the airlock and, at least we thought, had fried with the engine. It seems that it merely got pushed away and somehow survived in space. Now, before anybody starts screaming plot hole, I should actually remind folks that it's actually not unheard of for xenomorphs to survive the vacuum of space. Hi, Moon Pie. Hey, buddy, you want to say hello? No? Alright. The kitty, everybody. Moon Pie is insistent on being his little usual tsundere self. Hang on 1 second. Nope. Okay, fine. I will get you and I will pick you up and pet you for a while. Threatening the kitty with cuddles aside. Anywho, The movie then jumps to a young woman with just getting out of bed in a colony. She's greeted with what seems to be at first a friend with probably some mental development issues who proceeds to bombard us with bad jokes constantly over and over again. The dad joke variety. I definitely can say that that probably would be tiresome for some people, but it is an interesting approach for us to see where this is actually going. Naturally, of course, this colony is under control of Weyland-Yutani, and from the sound of it, it seems to be a mining colony. Our would-be protagonist, by the name of Rain, I'm guessing, considering, and I'm going to be 100% honest in this review, okay? When it came to the human protagonists of this movie, I wrote them off as xenofood. So if I don't remember their names, eh. You get away this time, Floofy. Next time I will cuddle you. You will be hugged, petted, and rubbed on and loved on. Anywho. By the way, my cat keeps trying to paw at my backside. He apparently thinks my rear end is his scratching post, even though he has a scratching post over to my other side here. I am not a scratching post. I am not. You know this. So I will probably refer to them as defining characteristics that I noticed of the character. The sad part is the only characters I remember the names for are the androids. And oh yes, there are androids to this. So, the individual we think of as her friend at first, with her goes to the main Weyland-Yutani station to try and get permission to leave off-world. We find out that this young woman has been trying to work a certain number of hours to get permission to leave for another planet, trying to get away from the mines. However, the Weyland-Yutani worker rebuffs her and says that corporate has decided to prevent any form of loss and has doubled the amount of work hours required for release on her contract. Meaning that despite the fact that she's already worked 12,000 hours and is very obviously a young woman, most likely in her teens, apparently Weyland is definitely showing their evil corporate side by demanding that she work 24,000 hours before they actually let her loose. Welcome to Alien. The corporations are retardedly evil. And I'm sorry, I know I just used an R word that a lot of people might say is offensive, but it's very simple. These people are very nonsensically stupid. I'm not hurting the cat, by the way, if you're hearing his mews. I'm just sitting there trying to pick him up, and he's protesting like, meow, meow, I want attention, but I don't want ups. It's cat. Anywho. Cat parents can relate. If you've ever owned a cat, you know what I'm talking about. Anywho. So, she and her friend, at least first we think, however, she calls him her brother. While she is doing this, some miscreant kids proceed to start beating on the poor gentleman, who at this point, at first, we thought might be representation of an autistic individual. Now, I myself am on the spectrum, and so are pretty much all of my friends. Rollmaster's on the spectrum, Trey is on the spectrum. We're all autistic. I'm on the, of course, all three of us are more or less on the high functioning level. However, it is at this time, as a bunch of evil turds, aka children, start beating on the poor fellow, that we find out that he's in fact a malfunctioning android, a synthetic, the, who is currently on the ground and sputtering after being kicked the living snot out of by a bunch of little kids. The main protagonist manages to fix him by rebooting him and bringing him back online. It seems that her father had found this gentleman and then fixed him up as best he could. However, most likely not being professional in robotics, wasn't quite as skilled as he had hoped. At any rate, they receive a call from one of their friends asking them to come meet them. They all meet up inside what seems to be a freighting vessel, where they come up with an interesting plan to simply ditch Weiyu's nonsense and make their own way to the planet. However, they can't do it without cryopods, because the journey with these vessels don't exactly have FTL speeds, and it would take them about 9 years to actually reach their destination. However, for as fortune would have it, the group believes that they think they've found a abandoned Wei vessel in orbit, one that is on its way of getting crushed in about 37 hours, that might actually have some cryogenic array available, figuring that they can eject and then use the cryogenic array to be able to hightail their own way straight to where they're headed. However, they need Andy the android, the professed brother of Rain, to help them get on board, as he is the only one that can speak, aka Mother. Mother, by the way, for those of you not familiar with the Alien franchise, is the name for the main computer used by all Weyland-Yutani vessels. At first hesitant, not wanting to put her quote-unquote brother at risk, the young Rain agrees, eventually allowing her and her friends to take off and head toward the mysterious quote-unquote abandoned ship. The pair includes Jerkwad, the one character I classified as Jerkwad, the nice guy, pregnant girl, and Buddhist pilot. Yes, I know it's not the nicest way to really refer to people, but like I said, at this point I pretty much peg them for alien fodder, so I tend to not try to attach myself to characters that I'm pretty much guessing are either going to be dead in a few minutes or not in very good shape later on. So my apologies if you guys find it offensive that I don't remember the names of most of these characters. The only reason I remember Rain is I bothered to try and actually Google it up. And even though I did read the names of the characters, they still escape me because it's just like dead, unalived, unalived, unalived. Lasted the longest, but still unalive. Yeah. Anywho. However, once they reach into orbit, they find out that it's not a ship out there, it's an entire space station. This totally doesn't raise red flags. I guess Weyland-Yutani just routinely dumps off massive, heavily expensive space stations and crashing toward the rings of the planet to be destroyed. But okay. Not fazed by this, they decide to dock next to an air vent and proceed to board. There they find that life support and even gravity has technically been turned off. Making their way through the ventilation, they find the room where we first saw in the very beginning of the film, with the two halves of the rock split open. The room is now heavily abandoned, and there is nothing left there, except for a few handful pieces of equipment But there's no indication of whatever happened to the scientists and the individuals aboard the station, or what had occurred with the rock itself. Sorry, I gotta turn off my phone notifications. Apparently, everybody's messaging everybody at the same time. There we go. Anywho, as they go and find the cryogenics chamber, to their surprise and to their own dismay, the cryogenics chamber on board the station only has enough fuel for 3 years, when they in fact need 9 years worth of full fuel. So the team on board decides to eject the chamber so that the ship can retrieve it and to go hunt for more fuel within the station. This relatively goes uneventful, except for Jerkwad deciding to start being nasty towards Andy simply because he's an android. And even lets it slip that Andy can't join them where they're going, and that Rain is going to have to abandon him or face prison time on the planet that they're going, because the planet itself, being an independent system, does not allow for synthetics on their planet. Which Rain apparently had not bothered to tell Andy or inform him at all. However, this is kind of interrupted by Mr. Nice Guy, who tries to explain to Annie that it's best that he didn't come after they were done with this. That she probably didn't want to hurt his feelings and simply wanted to keep him safe. Which seems to be a thing with Rain, protecting Andy, who is essentially the last remnants of her parents who they themselves had died within the mines. Which is pretty much the driving force of the entire cast and crew here. All of their family has essentially died within the mines of Weyland-Yutani, and are trying to escape the same fate. The ship later docks at a nearby docking bay found by the away team, and then proceeds to board in after them once the team finds some cryotubes. The team finds the cryo fuel, never, of course, asking the questions of what exactly are these things being used to freeze. Especially considering that during this beforehand they found what appeared to be a half-melted synthetic and a giant hole in the floor. My first immediate question would be, okay, what caused the massive hole in the floor? And the melted synthetic, but that's just me, apparently. At any rate, the boys managed to find the cryofuel and begin trying to extract it, one injuring himself by nearly freezing off his hand. However, this triggers the cryogenic array to start to fail, and this is where we lo and behold discover that the station has a crapload of facehuggers frozen aboard, which are now promptly starting to thaw. Yep, you have a pretty good guess, as well as I do, as to how this might very well end. As the gentlemen are now waiting for the girls to find the other android so they can strip him of his security clearance so that Andy can open the door, they manage to retrieve a disc from the downed android, handing it off to the gentleman to put it into Andy, who then goes into a form of reboot mode. Unfortunately, while that's going on, they start being attacked by facehuggers, managing to beat them away and try and throw them off, and protecting themselves here and there from being face-hugged and becoming unwanted dads, I guess. Anywho, Android Andy finally boots back up, opens the door, the boys get out, and as they finally manage to make their way through one of the blast doors, Right before it can truly shut, the Buddhist pilot lady gets face hugged. The now panicked team has no idea what to do. So Andy instructing them that, hey, maybe we should boot up the other android who might actually know what to do. This other android is named Rook, and you would actually find it very familiar because he looks exactly like the original science officer aboard the Nostromo. A nice little callback, as they actually modeled the face after the original actor. Nice little touch, I would say. Of course, this android appears at first to be willing to be helpful, informing them that there is not much more they can do for her. Their best bet is simply to either put her out of her own misery by unaliving her, or quarantine her somewhere so that simply leave her on the station and make their way out of here. However, one gentleman decides not to do that. The jerkwad himself decides to declare there is no way that they were going to do that, and they come up with an interesting idea to remove the facehugger. Normally, the facehugger would try and strangle her, which is what they found out when they first tried to remove her. But they figure they can cryo-freeze the tail, they won't be able to do so. Which they do succeed at pulling it off, and it does scamper away still alive, leaving a question of whether it had fully succeeded at its task or not. Normally, when facehuggers are done, they usually fall off and die after they're finished their task. However, Rook informs the crew that there's a 60-40 chance that even after they've managed to remove the creature, that she may already have been infected. He then turns to Andy and says, you know what you have to do. Afraid that Andy is going to try and kill the Buddhist pilot, the jerkwad runs off into the ship with others trying to stop Andy. They both enter the vessel and take off, leaving Andy and the two others on board the station. However, unfortunately for our pregnant lady protagonist and jerkwad, unfortunately for the Buddhist pilot, the xenomorph proceeds to chest burst out of her. In the event of her being unalive, she manages to kick the throttle, causing the ship to basically crash into a fuel pod, forcing the station off trajectory. Eventually, the ship manages to magically crash into a hangar bay, all in one piece. However, the pilot is definitely dead at this point, and as one famous YouTuber with long hair would say, known as Decker Shadow, the body count rises. Now, Jerkwad and the pregnant woman are now pretty much screwed, as they are now dealing with a xenomorph on board their ship. After finding the sloughed off skin shed by the small xenomorph, they discover what looks like a giant egg on the side of the wall. Now, Jerkwad, being a genius, having found some kind of cattle prod thing, decides to hook it up to the ship's power and decides to shove it in there and start shocking the living crap out of it. And first thinking that he's managed to kill it after literally shocking the holy living daylights out of it and thinking that after seeing a pool of acid blood coming out of it, that he had succeeded, only to get literally stabbed in the face by a xenomorph tail, which then proceeds to pour even more acid directly on him, leading to death by acid. Not a fun way to go. Meanwhile, the pregnant lady is trying to run out of the ship as the xenomorph proceeds to make its way out of its own little cocoon, eventually tripping and landing directly on a container below them. Meanwhile, the other crew try to make their way to her, Once they find her, she's regained consciousness after the fires were put out by extinguishers, which leads to an interesting moment for the franchise. One we expect the xenomorph to come jumping down, but doesn't. However, as they try to get Andy to open the door, the android notices that the xenomorph is right behind our pregnant friend. Unwilling to open the door, knowing that that's exactly what it wants. And that the moment that they open the door, it will leap and attack all of them. Refusing to open the door, Nice Guy, by the way, happens to be the brother of the pregnant girl, and isn't too happy when the xenomorph decides to take off with her. Haha! I warned you, didn't I, Floopy? Yes. Yes. No. Haha! I warned you you'd be captured, kitty. Yes, you did. I warned you. Meow. Yes. Where am I captive? Hello. Behold Moon Pie, everybody. Everybody's little cute kid. Yes. Everybody's favorite little kid. Meow. 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 Yes. Oh, hello. Excuse me while I cat dad for a moment. Hello, buddy. No. Anywho, Andy leads them back to Rook, who instructs them that he'll let them go and autopilot the ship back to the colony and then they can be allowed to go to wherever they wanted to go, as long as they delivered a particular sample that the scientists had been working on. These samples were derived from the face huggers, which and some people would recognize as the black goo from the Prometheus side of the story. Say what you will about Prometheus. You may not like the film. I have never personally seen it. But I would say that, yeah, black goo seems to be sticking around in the series nonetheless. So I'm sure there's more than a few people who will groan about it. However, Rook says that they had managed to synthesize some kind of agent from the black goo that would allow humanity and other creatures to be able to be healed and even more resilient than ever before. Kitty. Showing a video of a rat being injected with the black goo after having suffered severe trauma. The black goo seems to immediately heal the rat, restoring it to full health. However, as this is going on, there's a definite sense of something ain't right here. And considering I've GM'd this more than a few times before, you can bet I know that there's something wrong here. Because one of the very first things that you encounter when you have the starter set for the Alien RPG is that a similar situation in a pre-created module where scientists manufacture a cure for the bloodbursters caused by the black goo that actually ends up turning people into horrible monsters. Yeah, as soon as I saw that, I knew something bad was going to happen. You don't DM for Aliens the RPG and not know something bad's going to happen. However, during this interlude, our two protagonists that are left are introduced to having rifles. One of the male protagonists actually shows Rain how to actually use it. And these new pulse rifles are kind of interesting. They have something called an aim assist, which has a pneumatic assisting agent within the very stock of the weapon. The stock of the weapon then can essentially be unfolded and locking itself to your shoulder allows the weapon to automatically point directly at a target that's in front of it. A rather useful feature. And purportedly, this weapon also has a 400 round magazine. 400 rounds. Don't tell Biden. Ego does not sell for people having 30 rounds. Can't imagine a world where people can have a 400 round magazine in a rifle. Oh, yeah, I guarantee you people would be complaining about that very quickly. Anywho. However, the two do remark, saying, the android, that it might not be such a good idea to be giving them guns necessarily because these things bleed acid, as was established before. And he, however, assures them that he hopes that they don't actually have to use it, but perhaps that by merely having the weapons that the xenomorphs will see it as a perceived threat and choose not to charge them head on, leading them down a corridor that he believes would potentially lead them to safety. We are in for a shock. Turns out, he leads them practically right into the nest, as the classic Xeno black goo crap that's all over the walls throughout the entirety of the nest and aliens is now all along down this wall. And we also see upon the conveyor belts empty things that would have contained even more facehuggers. Because it's Weyland Yutani. Apparently, they've never ever heard of the sunk cost fallacy. Now, at first, our horror protagonists actually have the good sense of going, maybe we shouldn't go down this path. Let's go find somewhere else. However, upon hearing his sister's gasping breaths, our buddy decides, aka Nice Guy, decides to go running down there to go find his sister, where they find her thoroughly cocooned within the wall. With no facehugger at her feet, it's assumed that she hasn't been implanted. Perhaps left there simply to die. However, it's at this point that we realize that there's more than one xenomorph on the station, especially as the hallway is definitely littered with the corpses of what were the scientists aboard. Also, I forgot to mention this scene, but this is actually interesting to note too. In the scene prior to this, on their way to the same lab, they find that it seems that there is a capacity to be able to trick facehuggers. Since they seem to not have eyes, they apparently seem to track you via body heat and noise. So the protagonists figure out that if they elevate the room full of facehuggers to their body temperature and stay quiet, there's a good chance they can reasonably hide from the things. And it works until pregnant lady decide to radio the brother on the ship as she's trying to escape the xenomorph. Which is how they manage to try and open the door, but head to the lab anyway. At any rate, they find that she's injured, and Rook suggests injecting her with the substance. Now, of course, like I've said before, my immediate response was, no! And granted, that was actually supported because the same rat that we saw in the video, we later see the cage, and it's dead and busted through and horribly mutated. However, in order to escape, they manage to call an elevator. The brother, however, is sacrificed as he's grabbed from up to the roof by a xenomorph tail and then summarily chomped on. The poor gentleman unalived by almost unceremoniously. Andy is knocked prone and is on the ground jittering as a xenomorph stands over him. However, the xenomorph, pretty much realizing that Andy is not a living thing but an android, decides to leave him alone. On the elevator, the protagonist Rain and the pregnant woman have a discussion where she decides to tell her to take the samples to the ship and get off the station. And she decides to go back for Andy using a ladder on the side of the elevator. She sends the elevator up with the pregnant woman on board while she climbs her way back down to where Andy is. There, she convinces Andy to allow her to remove the module in his neck, which has been turning him into a stooge for the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, allowing her to get her brother back and reboot him safely. However, as they make their way back to the door to try and get back into the lab and find another way out, Rook decides to lock them in, showing his evil turd self once again. The pair are now beset by xenomorphs, coming at them from the hallway. This, however, allows Rain to do something rather clever. Turning off the gravity, she then proceeds to shoot the ever-living daylights out of the xenomorphs and facehuggers, using almost all of the gun's 400 rounds. I guess nobody's complaining about having 400-round magazine when you're dealing with holy crap evil alien monsters with acid blood. However, turning off the gravity, although a smart move, not only disorienting the xenomorphs at first, but allowing the blood to not drop on the floor and decompress them, now leaves them with a hallway full of, well, acid. In which we get an interesting scene where the characters manage to ballerina themselves around the acid blood. Even at one point where Rain manages to use the rifle kind of as a thruster to avoid a massive glob of acid that would most certainly have killed her almost instantly. They make their way to the elevator where Andy tries to call it, but as Rain informs him, the elevator doesn't work if there's no gravity. Thankfully, it is established earlier on in the show, in the movie, that the gravity systems do have to purge themselves every 8 minutes. And thankfully for them, that time is almost close. However, there is definitely Xenos coming, so they manage to force the gates open and start climbing their way up the ladder, being beset by xenomorphs everywhere. However, just as they're floating their way up, the gravity decides to turn back on for a short period of time. The xenomorphs find themselves rather unceremoniously thrown out of the space station as the blood immediately plops onto the floor of the station, melting its way through, causing a massive decompression. This leads to an almost fake-out moment where our protagonist might actually be sucked out into space and die, while her android brother looks on, clinging to a rail. However, rather miraculously, I guess as you could call it, she's actually saved by a xenomorph that wraps its tail around her, preventing her from being sucked up, and puts her onto a ladder to grab hold and hang on. Yeah, she's saved by a xenomorph. I mean, that's new. Okay. However, much to her dismay, a facehugger does start trying to crawl over and get her. It seems to be the xenomorph's true plan all along. Just when you thought you might get a hero Xeno, I guess. Who am I kidding? Xenos aren't heroes. Xenomorphs aren't heroes. However, just in time, her android brother manages to get a hold of the rifle that got stuck in the wall, shoots the facehugger, and then proceeds to jump down, shooting the xenomorph the whole way through, landing on top of the elevator, which at that point had been sucked all the way down by the decompression of the station. And we get our favorite line of all times. Get away from her, you B-word. Yeah, YouTube doesn't allow us to really say curse words anymore. For a company that got sued for taking information from kids, you would think they would start allowing more adult stuff on this platform again, but YouTube doesn't make sense anymore. I think everybody has kind of agreed to that by now. The two of them manage to get their way back on board the ship and start taking off. However, unbeknownst to them, the pregnant lady had actually injected herself with the black goo, hoping to save her child and herself. As they proceed to basically decide to take it off remote pilot and decide to go to their destination anyway, taking the samples with them. Much to Rook's own dismay, but he doesn't get to say much for very long, as eventually, as the station is literally crushed and destroyed in the rings of the planet. However, just as we think that things are going swimming and our friends are going to escape, once the young Rain manages to plug in Andy to prepare for the long trip, and after thinking she had put her friend in cryo so that she could sleep, she starts to notice something wrong with her friend's cryo bed. As she opens it up, her friend is in panic, as her body, the one shown no sign of pregnancy, is now has a bump displaying full term and giving a bloody birth inside of the cryotube, which comes out piping hot. The young Rain tries to throw it out of the airlock, as what is being born was not only super bloody for the poor woman, but looks like a freaking xenomorph egg. However, as it burns her hands, she drops it. The egg opens up, and inside it first appears to be a baby boy. A small child, a human baby, just surrounded in acid. In an attempt to try and save it, she goes down into the cargo area, where she finds the acid-filled thing, but the baby is nowhere to be found. However, it is at this point we realize that the baby ain't as human as they thought it was. As it proceeds, as we watch the footsteps on the tarp, it becomes more and more Xeno-looking as we start following it, where it is eventually found to be towering over its own mother. This now fully almost adult-looking infant is now about 8 feet tall with xenomorph pipes coming out of his back, and seems to be sniffing his mother. Eventually being found to be, dining on her by Rain. Rain and the monster proceed to fight, where she then tricks him into coming into the cargo bay and then unlocks dropping the cargo container into the moon rings itself while wearing a spacesuit. We get a final confrontation of her trying to fight this thing off, as finally it ends up being swept into space and hopefully swept into the rocks and ice below to be battered and killed. She makes her way back up to the ship and proceeds to find her brother, which the monster had slashed the neck of. Promising to fix him, she puts the android into the cryophraser, makes a last log, and then freezes herself for the long 9-year trip to where they're headed. And it's at this point the movie ends. Now, again, I rather enjoyed it, and quite frankly, my descriptions are kind of jumbled here and there. So, again, I would recommend that you watch it for yourself. But honestly, like I said, I rather enjoyed this film. It was a fun little thing. And the fact that it managed to keep my attention and I'm diagnosed ADHD says something. Yes, I'm diagnosed ADHD with autism and how it works. But the fact that it kept my attention and I was able to notice all the different details is rather interesting. Now, it's probably not going to be everybody's cup of tea. Obviously, there's going to be some people that will groan about the black goo. And the last time we saw a more humanized xenomorph was in Alien Resurrection. And that movie was not good. But I have to say that I did enjoy this more monstrous version of it than anything else. But maybe you should, but in this case, it's probably best that you form your own opinions on it. I rather like the writing of the script. Even if I didn't remember the characters' names, I still remembered most of what they did and what their character was like. Hence why I literally described it. And it's one thing for Jerkwad to describe, because apparently one of the things I forgot to mention, the reason why he was angry at Andy was because another android had left his parents to die in order to save their minors. Yeah. But at any rate, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Please leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below. It helps me with the algorithm, and I'm small enough, really, that could actually be of good help. Thanks for watching again, and I hope to see you next time.